My parents called my son and me freeloaders, so I took back the house and the life they stole. Hello, my name is Colleen Harper. I am 36 years old and a product manager in Louisville, Kentucky. I've built a stable life for myself and my 12-year-old son. But last month, in the dining room of the house I bought, a family dinner that was supposed to feel warm turned into something no one expected. My father suddenly screamed in my face, "You and your kid are just freeloaders!" My mother didn't object. She simply smiled and nodded in agreement. The cruel irony was that they were still living in my own house. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. I just looked them straight in the eyes and delivered one sentence that left the whole room frozen. From that moment, everything began to crumble. Why did I have to face my parents like this? What drove our relationship to fracture so deeply that it may never heal? What would you do if you were in the same situation? Share your thoughts. Your story might be the message someone else needs to hear. To understand why I drew that line, I need to take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, in a modest 2-story house with creaky floors and a backyard that always smelled of freshly cut grass. I was 18, full of dreams, when my world turned upside down. My grandfather had passed a year earlier, leaving me $100,000 in his will, a safety net meant for my future, maybe college or a start in life. I was thrilled, planning to study computer science, picturing a career where I could build something of my own. But my parents had other ideas. One humid summer evening, they called me into the living room. My father sat in his old recliner, arms crossed, his face stern. My mother stood by the window, avoiding my eyes. They didn't waste time with small talk. "We need your inheritance," my father said, his voice flat like he was discussing the weather. I blinked, confused. "Need it for what?" I asked, my stomach twisting. My mother finally looked at me, her expression a mix of guilt and resolve. "Your brother has a chance to make it big," she said. "He's starting a construction business with your father, and they need capital to get it off the ground." "It's a sure thing, Colleen. We'll pay you back." Philip, my older brother, wasn't even there to explain himself. He was always their golden child, 2 years older, charming, the one they pinned their hopes on. I was the afterthought, the one expected to fall in line. I stood there, clutching the letter of acceptance to the University of Louisville's engineering program in my hand. "What about my college?" I asked, my voice shaking. My father shrugged. "You can get loans, Colleen. This is for the family." My mother nodded, adding, "Philip's business will set us all up, you'll see." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. $100,000, my future, was gone, redirected to a pipe dream I had no say in. They didn't ask for my permission. They just took it, promising to repay me once the business took off. Spoiler alert, it never did. The construction company flopped within a year due to bad contracts and worse decisions. My parents never mentioned paying me back. Not once that night I made a choice. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, and the $500 I'd saved from babysitting. I walked out of that house without a goodbye. No one stopped me. No one called to check if I was okay. I was 18, alone, and determined to prove I didn't need them. I moved into a cramped apartment near campus, sharing it with 2 strangers to split the rent. I enrolled in college, but tuition was a beast. I worked 3 jobs: waitressing at a diner, stocking shelves at a grocery store, and tutoring high school kids in math. Some nights, I'd collapse on a mattress on the floor, too tired to eat. There were weeks when I lived on instant noodles and coffee, stretching every penny to cover books or bills. I'd stare at my acceptance letter pinned to the wall and remind myself why I kept going. My parents' voices echoed in my head. This is for the family. Their family never included me. College was a grind, but I clawed my way through. I studied late into the night, fueled by spite and a stubborn need to prove them wrong. My parents called maybe twice a year, always with the same script. "How's school?" my mother would ask, her tone distant. Before I could answer, she'd pivot. "Your brother's working so hard on his new project." Philip, always Philip. Never a question about how I paid my rent or if I had enough to eat. I stopped expecting them to care. By my senior year, I was burned out but unbreakable. I graduated with a degree in computer science, top of my class, and landed an entry-level job at a tech startup in Louisville. For the first time, I could breathe. I paid off my student loans bit by bit, moved into a small but decent apartment, and started building a life. Then, I met my ex-husband. He was a colleague, sharp, funny, the kind of guy who seemed dependable. We got married, had my son, and for a moment, I thought I'd found stability. But life had other plans. 3 years in, I found texts on his phone, proof he'd been cheating for months. I didn't beg him to stay. I packed his bags, left them by the door, and said, "Get out." He did, but he stayed in our son's life, sending money every month. That was enough for me. Those years shaped me into someone who doesn't bend. I fought for every scrap of my success while my parents and Philip coasted on excuses. They never apologized for taking my inheritance, never acknowledged the nights I went hungry. That betrayal planted a seed of resentment that grew quietly, waiting for the day I'd face them again. At 36, I've built a life I'm proud of. My job isn't just a paycheck, it's a testament to every late night I spent studying, every shift I worked to pay my way through college. I manage a team that builds software people rely on, and I'm damn good at it. My name carries weight in the industry, and that's something I earned, not inherited. I own a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb with a mortgage I pay on time and a backyard where my son plays soccer. This life, this stability, it's mine, built from scratch. My son Dylan is 12 now, and he's the center of my world. He's got this infectious laugh that makes even my worst days bearable. Whether he's acing his math tests or begging me to let him stay up late for one more video game, I see so much of myself in him. The stubborn streak, the quiet determination. I make sure he knows he's enough, that he doesn't have to prove himself to anyone. Every weekend, we have a ritual, pizza night, a movie, and him telling me about his dreams of being an astronaut. I'd move mountains for that kid, and he knows it. He's my reason for everything. My parents, on the other hand, are a different story. After I left home at 18, they barely reached out. A birthday card here, a Christmas call there. Always brief, always hollow. But over the last few years, their messages started to change. My mother would text, "How's work going, Colleen?" Not because she cared, but as a segue to ask for money. "Your father's business isn't doing well," she'd write. Or, "Philip's trying to start something new. Could you help out?" The first time I sent a couple $1,000s thinking it was a one-off, but the requests kept coming. $5,000 for a car repair, $10,000 for a business opportunity. I started saying no. Each time, my mother's texts got sharper. "You're doing so well. Can't you spare something for family?" My father called once, his voice gruff, saying, "We sacrificed so much for you, Colleen." Sacrificed? What exactly? The inheritance they took, the years they ignored me? I stopped responding to most of their messages. I'd see their names pop up on my phone, my mother, my father, and let the calls go to voicemail. Philip, my brother, never called himself. He didn't need to. My parents were his mouthpiece. I knew they were still propping him up, still betting on his next big idea while I was out here building my own life. It stung, but I'd learned to live with it. I had Dylan, my career, and a circle of friends who felt more like family than my blood ever did. One of those friends is Denise Bailey, my best friend and financial advisor. She's been my rock since we met at a networking event 5 years ago. Denise is the one who helped me buy my house, set up Dylan's college fund, and plan for a future where I don't have to worry about money. She's blunt, no nonsense, and always has my back. When I told her about my parents' money requests, she didn't sugarcoat it. "They're using you," she said, her voice firm. "You don't owe them a dime." Her words stuck with me, reinforcing the boundaries I'd started to set. I thought I'd found my balance, work, Dylan, a life I could call my own. I wasn't looking for closure or reconciliation with my parents. I just wanted to keep moving forward. But then, my mother's number flashed on my phone one evening, her voice trembling with urgency. That call would pull me back into the chaos I'd spent years escaping. "Hey, bro," that call came on a quiet Tuesday evening. I was helping Dylan with his math homework, his pencil scratching across a notebook as we sat at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. My mother's name. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since her last text asking for $10,000 for some vague emergency. I let it ring, debating whether to ignore it. But something in me stirred, maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, and I picked up. Her voice was shaky, not the usual calculated tone she used when asking for money. "Colleen, it's your father," she said. "He's sick, really sick. We need you to come home." I froze, the word home hitting me like a slap. Home. The house I'd walked away from at 18, the place where they'd taken my inheritance without a second thought. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my heart racing. "What's wrong with him?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated, then said, "It's his heart. Doctors say he needs surgery, but we're in trouble. The bank's threatening to foreclose on the house, $300,000 in debt from your father's latest business venture." Her words were rushed, almost desperate, but I caught the familiar undertone. They needed something from me. I leaned back in my chair, glancing at Dylan, who was watching me with those big, curious eyes. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My mother didn't miss a beat. "Come back, Colleen. Talk to the bank. Maybe help us out. You're doing so well and we're family." There it was, the same tired line she'd used for years, family. I wanted to laugh, but my throat tightened instead. I told her I'd think about it and hung up, my mind spinning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my couch, a glass of wine untouched on the coffee table, replaying her words. My father's sick. The house at risk. $300,000. It wasn't just about money, it was the weight of everything I'd buried since I left. Part of me wanted to ignore them, let them deal with their mess. They'd never cared about my struggles, so why should I care about theirs? But another part, the part that still remembered my father teaching me to ride a bike or my mother baking cookies when I was little, nagged at me. What if I didn't go back? Would I regret it when it was too late? I called Denise the next morning. She answered on the first ring, her voice sharp and practical. "Don't let them guilt-trip you," she said when I told her about the call. "They've been bleeding you dry for years. You don't owe them anything." I knew she was right. Denise always cut through the noise, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to face them, not for their sake, but for mine. If my father was really sick, I didn't want to live with the what-ifs. I told her I was going back to Louisville, not to save them, but to close a chapter I'd left open too long. I sat Dylan down that evening, explaining I'd be gone for a few days. "Is Grandpa okay?" he asked, his voice small. I hated that he had to worry about a man he barely knew, thanks to my parents' absence from his life. "I don't know yet," I said, brushing his hair back. "But I'll be back soon, and we'll have pizza night, okay?" He nodded, trusting me completely. That trust, it's what kept me grounded. Brooke packing for the trip felt surreal. I hadn't been to my parents' house in years, not since a tense Christmas visit when Dylan was 5. I booked a flight, arranged for Dylan to stay with a trusted neighbor, and called my boss to take a few days off. The whole time, my stomach churned. I wasn't just going back to a house, I was walking into a battlefield. My mother's call wasn't just about my father's health or the house. It was a demand cloaked in desperation. I knew they'd ask for money, probably more than I could imagine, and Philip, my brother, was probably lurking in the background, ready to benefit from whatever I gave. As the plane touched down in Louisville, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. I rented a car and drove to the house I'd once called home. It looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the lawn overgrown. My mother greeted me at the door, her face pale but composed. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice softer than on the phone. I nodded, stepping inside, bracing myself for what was coming. My father was in the living room, looking frailer than I'd ever seen him, but his eyes still had that stubborn glint. Philip wasn't there. Typical. Obruthi didn't waste time. Over coffee, my mother laid it out. The bank was moving fast, and they needed me to step in. "You've got the means," she said, her tone shifting from pleading to expectant. I listened, saying nothing, my mind already racing toward the confrontation I knew was inevitable. The next evening, I agreed to stay for a family dinner. That's when everything unraveled. The dinner table was set, but I wasn't prepared for the ambush. I'd agreed to stay for the meal, hoping for a civil conversation, maybe some clarity about my father's health, or the foreclosure looming over their house. Instead, I walked into a setup. My parents had invited my brother, Philip, who strolled in late, his usual smirk plastered across his face. My mother fussed over him, piling food onto his plate, while my father sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable but tense. I took a seat, my stomach tight, sensing the storm brewing. The first few minutes were deceptively calm. My mother chattered about neighbors I didn't remember, her voice overly bright, like she was trying to paper over the cracks. Philip bragged about his latest business idea, some vague real estate venture that sounded as shaky as his last one. I nodded politely, picking at my food, waiting for the real reason I was there. My father broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. "Colleen, we need to talk about the house," he said, leaning forward. "The bank's not budging. We owe $300,000 and they're ready to take it all." I set my fork down, meeting his gaze. "I know," I said carefully. "You told me yesterday. What's the plan?" My mother jumped in, her tone sharp. "The plan is you, Colleen. You're making good money. $350,000 a year, right? You could cover at least $200,000. It's the least you can do for family." Her words landed like a punch. $200,000, not a loan, not a discussion, just a demand, as if my life's work was theirs to claim. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's a lot of money," I said. "I have my own responsibilities, my son, my house, my future. Why is this on me?" My father's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "You've always been selfish," he snapped. "We raised you, gave you everything, and now you're hoarding your money while we lose our home." I stared at him, stunned. Gave me everything? They'd taken my inheritance, left me to fend for myself at 18, and now I was the selfish one? Philip chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Come on, Colleen, don't play the victim. You're sitting pretty while. We're drowning. Step up." I clenched my fists under the table, my blood boiling. They hadn't even asked about Dylan, who was back home safe with a neighbor. They didn't care about my life, my sacrifices, only what I could give them. I was about to respond when my mother leaned forward, her smile cold and calculated. "You and your son are just freeloaders," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "Living off our sacrifices, acting like you're better than us." The word freeloaders hit me like a blade, but it was the mention of Dylan that snapped something inside me. My son, the kid who'd never asked for anything but my love, was not their punching bag. I pushed my chair back, standing up, my voice low but firm. "Don't you dare bring my son into this," I said, locking eyes with her. "You've got no right to talk about him or me like that." My father scoffed, his face red. "Show some respect, Colleen. We're your parents." I almost laughed at the irony. "Respect? From the people who've taken everything from me?" I turned to Philip, my eyes blazing. "And you," I said, my voice sharp as a knife. "You've coasted on their excuses your whole life, letting them beg for you. Don't tell me how to live." His smirk vanished, but he stayed silent. "Ahapru," my mother tried to speak, her voice rising. "Colleen, you owe us. We're family." I cut her off, my patience shattered. "Family doesn't demand what I've earned. Family doesn't insult my son." "You want to call us freeloaders? Fine, I'm done." My heart pounded, but my resolve was unbreakable. I looked from my father to my mother, then to Philip, and made my decision. "I'm through letting you walk over me," I said, each word deliberate. "I'll take charge of this for me and Dylan, not for you." My mother laughed, her tone dripping with scorn. "Take charge? You've always been a dreamer, Colleen. You'll never outdo us." I held her gaze, unflinching. "Keep talking, you'll see." The room fell silent, their faces a mix of shock and contempt. My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice a growl. "You think you're better than us? You're nothing without this family." I didn't flinch. I'd spent years building my life, and their words couldn't touch me anymore. I walked out of the dining room, my hands steady, my mind racing with a plan. I called Denise that night, her voice a lifeline. "You're really done with them?" she asked, her tone a mix of worry and pride. "I have to be," I said. "For Dylan, for me." She didn't argue, just promised to help. I knew the fight was far from over. I thought the worst was over, but my mother had other plans. 2 days after the dinner, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends, co-workers, even Dylan's soccer coach sent me messages. "Have you seen this?" I opened TikTok, and there it was, a video from my mother's account. Her face was tear-streaked, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "My daughter abandoned us," she said, clutching a tissue. She's got all this money but won't help her own family save our home. She's turned her back on us, on her own blood." The caption read, "Ungrateful daughter leaves parents to lose everything." It had thousands of views, hundreds of comments calling me heartless, selfish, a disgrace. My stomach churned. Eleanor had taken our fight public, twisting the truth to paint me as the villain. I sat on my hotel bed, staring at the screen, my hands shaking with anger. She hadn't just insulted me, she'd dragged Dylan into this, implying he was part of my so-called betrayal. I wanted to fire back, post my own video, tell the world how she and my father took my inheritance, how they called us freeloaders, but I knew better. Reacting in anger would only fuel her narrative. I needed to be smarter, strategic. Olberok, I called Denise, my advisor, who picked up immediately. "I saw the video," she said before I could speak. "It's disgusting." "Colleen, what do you want to do?" I paced the room, my mind racing. "I want to take control," I said, my voice steady despite the rage. "They're not going to bully me into submission, not this time." Denise didn't hesitate. "Then let's hit them where it hurts, the house they're desperate to keep. You've got the means, buy it out from under them." Brewer. The idea sparked something in me. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what they'd tried to take. My power, my dignity. I told her to start the process, and she promised to connect me with a lawyer by morning. The next day, I met with a real estate attorney Denise recommended, a sharp woman named Laura who laid out the situation. The bank was ready to foreclose on my parents' house due to their $300,000 loan default. Laura confirmed I could buy the property directly from the bank, wiping out their claim. "It's not cheap," she warned, "but your finances can handle it. You'd own the house outright, and they'd have no leverage." I nodded, my resolve hardening. This wasn't about saving them, it was about ending their hold over me. Denise worked her magic, pulling together my savings, investments, and a loan I could comfortably manage. Within a week, we had a deal with the bank. I signed the papers, my hand steady, as I became the legal owner of the house I'd grown up in. It felt surreal, like closing a wound I'd carried for years. But I wasn't done. I had Laura draft a contract. My parents could stay in the house, but only if they agreed to repay the $300,000 over 5 years with interest. If they missed a payment, they'd be out. It was a lifeline, but one with strings, my strings. I didn't tell them right away. I wanted the news to land with weight. Instead, I had Laura send an official notice to my parents and Philip, outlining the new reality. I owned the house, and they were tenants bound by my terms. The notice also included a cease and desist letter demanding Eleanor take down the TikTok video and stop spreading lies. "Defamation has consequences," Laura wrote, her words crisp and unyielding. I knew my mother would see it as a slap, but I didn't care. She'd crossed a line, and I was done playing nice. When the notice arrived, my mother called, her voice shrill with fury. "You think you can control us, Colleen?" she spat. "You're no better than us, throwing your money around like you're some big shot." I let her rant, my silence louder than her words. "You got the notice," I said finally. "Follow it, or face the consequences." I hung up, my heart racing but my conscience clear. Philip texted later, a single line, "You're ruthless." I didn't respond. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't sorry either. Brooke. I flew back to Louisville that weekend, picking up Dylan from the neighbor's house. He ran to me, his smile brighter than the sun. "Did you fix everything?" he asked, his voice full of trust. I hugged him tight, my throat tight. "I'm working on it, kid," I said. I didn't tell him about the house or the video, not yet. He didn't need to carry that weight. But I knew this fight was far from over. My mother's silence after the call felt too calculated, like she was planning her next move. I sat with Denise that evening, going over the paperwork. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said, her tone half warning, half admiration. "They're not going to take this lying down." I nodded, staring at the contract in my hands. I'd taken a stand, but I was ready for whatever came next. My mother's silence didn't last long. A week after the legal notice arrived, I got a call from Laura, my attorney. "They're refusing to sign the contract," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Your parents claim they don't owe you anything, and they're demanding to stay in the house." I wasn't surprised. Eleanor and Kenneth had spent their lives dodging accountability, always twisting the narrative to suit them. But this time, I held the cards. I owned the house now, every square foot of it, and their refusal only sealed their fate. I told Laura to move forward with eviction proceedings. No more chances, I said, my voice steady. They made their choice. The eviction process wasn't quick, but it was thorough. Laura filed the necessary paperwork, and a court date was set. My parents fought back, of course. Eleanor sent me a flurry of texts, each one sharper than the last. "You're tearing this family apart," she wrote. "How can you do this to your own blood?" I didn't respond. Her words stung, but they didn't sway me. She'd called Dylan a freeloader, smeared me on TikTok, and expected me to bankroll their mistakes. Kenneth's messages were colder, more direct. "You'll regret this, Colleen." I saved every text, every voicemail, handing them over to Laura as evidence of their hostility. Philip stayed quiet for the most part, but I knew he was in the background, egging them on. He'd always been their golden child, the one they propped up while dismissing me. When Laura served the eviction notice in person, she told me Philip was there, his face pale but his mouth shut. He didn't dare confront me directly, not after I'd called him out at the dinner. The notice gave them 30 days to vacate. If they didn't, the sheriff would step in. I didn't want it to come to that, but I was prepared. I'd spent too long letting them walk over me, and I wasn't bending now. By the end of the month, they were gone. Laura confirmed they'd moved out, leaving the house in disarray, boxes half-packed, furniture shoved against walls, as if they'd left in a huff. I flew back to Louisville to inspect the property. Walking through the rooms felt strange, like stepping into a memory I didn't want to relive. The kitchen, where my mother once baked cookies, was now cluttered with unwashed dishes. My old bedroom, where I dreamed of a future beyond their reach, had been turned into storage for Philip's failed ventures. I didn't linger. I hired a cleaning crew and put the house up for rent. The income would cover the loan I'd taken to buy it, and anything left would go to Dylan's college fund. I learned later that my parents had rented a small apartment on the edge of town. Kenneth's health was still fragile, but he was managing, according to a mutual acquaintance. They'd found part-time jobs, Eleanor at a grocery store, Kenneth doing bookkeeping for a local business. For the first time in years, they were forced to stand on their own. Philip, unsurprisingly, had moved in with them, still chasing his next big idea. I didn't care to know the details. Their lives were no longer my burden. Cutting them off was harder than I expected. Not because I wanted their approval, I'd given up on that years ago, but because letting go meant closing a door I'd always hoped might open to something better. I blocked their numbers, deleted their voicemails, and unfollowed Eleanor's TikTok account. The video she'd posted was gone, taken down after Laura's cease and desist letter, but the comments lingered in my mind. Strangers had called me cruel, a bad daughter, without knowing the years of betrayal behind it. I had to remind myself their opinions didn't matter. I knew my truth, and that was enough. Berkey Dylan became my anchor. When I got back home, he was waiting with a drawing he'd made, a rocket ship soaring past the moon, his dream of being an astronaut in every line. "For you, Mom," he said, his grin wide. I hugged him, my heart full. Every choice I'd made, the house, the fight, the eviction, was for him, to show him what it means to stand up for yourself. We spent that weekend planting flowers in our backyard, something we'd been talking about for months. As we dug in the dirt, Dylan asked about his grandparents. "Are they mad at us?" he said, his voice small. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "They're mad at themselves," I said, "but we're okay, you and me. We've got each other." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to planting. That moment, his trust in me was worth more than any apology I'd ever get. Denise was there through it all, checking in with her usual blunt advice. "You're free now," she said one evening over coffee. "They can't touch you anymore." She was right, but freedom came with a weight. I'd spent so long defining myself against my parents' failures, their demands, their betrayal. Now I had to figure out who I was without that fight. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects, mentoring younger colleagues. I wanted Dylan to see a mother who wasn't just surviving, but thriving. My team at the tech firm noticed the change, my focus sharper, my confidence unshaken. I wasn't just a product manager anymore. I was someone who'd taken back her life. I thought about Travis, my ex-husband, a few times during those months. He'd stayed out of the drama, true to his hands-off approach. When he called to check on Dylan, I kept it civil. "You're doing good, Colleen," he said once, his voice softer than usual. I didn't need his validation, but it felt like a small acknowledgement of how far I'd come. Dylan deserved a father who showed up, even if it was just through phone calls and birthday cards. I made sure those lines stayed open for his sake. Looking back, the lesson wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about the house, the money, or even the pain they'd caused. It was about respect, something my parents never understood. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who see you, who lift you up, who fight for you as much as you fight for them. My parents and Philip chose themselves every time. I chose Dylan, Denise, the life I'd built from nothing. That's what family means to me now. I still drive by the old house sometimes when I'm in that part of town. It's rented out to a young couple now, their kids' bikes scattered on the lawn. It's just a house, not a home. Not for me, not anymore. Dylan's laughter fills my house, our house, with a warmth I never knew growing up. I don't know if my parents ever learned their lesson, and I don't need to.